Let's talk about Aquaman Abyss in my DC cinematic universe. We open up on a Japanese research vessel that is monitoring a section of the ocean above the Mariana Trench. It's like a bunch of storms and rogue waves and unexplainable phenomena and stuff. After getting a strange reading from down below, the researchers send an American Marine down to check on their divers. This Marine shapeshifts into a horrible fish hybrid monster. He is Stonefish of the Aquamarines, and he jumps into the ocean. Slowly but surely, we hear over the radio all of the divers below the water be eaten one by one. And as Stonefish is swimming through the blackness, there's a lightning strike from up above, and we see behind Stonefish the illuminated silhouette of a giant mosasaur. Back on the ship, we hear Stonefish scream out in horror. But then we see that the person he is calling to is just a severed hand aboard the ship. And we see the ship crawling with thousands of trench dwellers. They begin tearing the crew apart. Stonefish manages to signal an emergency SOS to Amanda Waller just in time for the massive mosasaur to breach the waves and devour him. And then suddenly, giant tentacles shoot up out of the water, grabbing the massive research vessel and pulling it under the waves. And then we cut to Atlantis, where we see Queen Tula talking to Mira. They have been contacted by the UN ambassador, stating that the Japanese and US government want Atlanteans to meet them by the Mariana Trench because they suspect there's some weird Atlantis plot going on, because that is wicked close to the Kingdom of Xebel, Mira and Kaldur'ahm's home kingdom. And this is a coincidence because Xebel has gone radio silent with Poseidonus for the last 2 months, and the scout that they sent the other week to check on it hasn't returned. So to ease concerns, Tula agrees to send Aquaman and Aqualad to check it out. We then cut and see Kaldur'ahm, who is playing a game of hunting with Andrina, who is now about 7 years old, Aquaman and Mira's daughter. It's just this lovely thing of them like swimming through kelp and playing with each other. It's just lovely and wholesome, and then he jumps out of the kelp. It's just this big, awesome family moment, and we see that Arthur and Kaldur'ahm very much sort of view each other as brothers, and Andrina straight up refers to Kaldur'ahm as her big brother. They get a message from Garth, the new head of the Royal Guard, and Garth says they were ordered to return to the capital on super business. They head on in and they get their orders. We check in with Mira, who is very pregnant with their second child, a boy this time. She makes her husband promise to be back before the baby is born. He says, don't worry about it, I got this. Tula hands her uncle the trident because there's probably going to be some shenanigans that would require the trident in his hand. And Tula orders Garth to accompany Kaldur and Aquaman. So the trio head out to meet a United States ship over the Mariana Trench, and when they get there, they are introduced to the Aquamarines. After the white light during Crisis, a bunch of metagenes were activated, and this is a shit ton of aquatic Marines that Amanda Waller has on call. She sent them and the foremost deep-sea diving expert and marine biologist, David Hyde, Black Manta, Kaldur's papa. He is out on Suicide Squad release. So, bomb in his neck, there to have a good time with his kid and check out what the fuck's going on in the ocean. The Aquamarines are mostly made up of this crew right here: orca, octo, shark, barracuda, lionfish, and stonefish. But stonefish already done got eaten. But besides this crew, we have 3 very important additions: Delphis Badami, Koryak, and Captain Lorena Marquez, who in fact Arthur and Kaldur'ahm met during the 52 series. She is a citizen of San Diego sank. Whoops. And while Koryak and Delphis have some more aquatic features, with Koryak being able to also shapeshift into a sort of mutant-looking thing, and Delphis possessing a whole bunch of shiny fish scales, Lorena has none of that and appears to just have a full-blown metagene that basically turns her into an Atlantean. This is basically the same metagene that Poseidon had way back in the day. The team exchange communicators, and they all give each other code names for this mission. So the Aquamarines, they were their respective fishes. Delphis is Dolphin, Koryak is Narwhal, Lorena is known as Aqua Girl, and then Aquaman, Manta, Aqualad, and Garth gets the nickname Tempest. With that, the team all dive into the water and swim down to the Kingdom of Xebel, which they find as an abandoned ghost town. As they explore the kingdom, Kaldur takes this chance to take Manta to visit Lucia's grave, and Manta finally gets a chance to actually grieve over his lost wife. Kaldur goes to check on his parents, or his aunt and uncle, whichever way you want to go with it, and he finds their house completely destroyed. We then tune in with Arthur, Lorena, Garth, and Delphis, who are exploring the town square, and they find a very small child. But when she turns around, her eyes are sunken into her head, and her mouth is full of anglerfish teeth, and she leaps on them. And suddenly, more monsters begin crawling out of the shadows to attack the team. They are overrun with trench dwellers, and as they're trying to fight off this horde, the mosasaur swims out of the trench. The little girl then bites into Orca of the Aquamarine's arm, drawing blood. And we see that blood drive the trench dwellers into a frenzy. They swim towards Orca and eat him alive. Arthur is confused. He's trying to theorize what's happening. Perhaps maybe this is the anti-life equation somehow returned, because these things are kind of zombie-esque, but not quite. They're more horrible fish monsters. And then Arthur turns to this, and he tries to use his fish telepathy to get this thing to turn around. But when he reaches out, something else connects to his mind. Eldritch horrors flood his mind, and a horrible voice says to him, "Blood of Poseidon." Arthur screams and writhes in pain. Kaldur has to grab him, and the team evacuate the area. Unfortunately, Lionfish is eaten whole by the mosasaur. Manta deploys a shock mine to scare this thing off, and the team go and hide off in a nearby cave, as they're too far away from the ship to outrun the horde for that long. When they reach the cave, Arthur confirms to the other Atlanteans that, hey, when he tried to use his fish telepathy, something grabbed onto him, and he warns them, do not use that right now. So Kaldur and Garth agree not to. The team decide to wait for daybreak, hoping that when the sun comes out, the horde will go to sleep. And their hunch is correct. The horde crawls back into the trench when the sun comes up. And unfortunately, the team have to follow them. As they work their way down the trench, the Aquamarines theorize as to what the trench dwellers could be, but Kaldur knows all too well. You see, the Kingdom of Xebel has a horrible history. Fish hybrid Atlanteans are not something uncommon. For instance, King Shark. But hundreds of years ago, Xebel viewed hybrid fish children as unclean and tossed any child born with that mutation into the trench. So Kaldur is theorizing some of those babies survived, and this is an inbred, nocturnal, deep-sea, horrible variation of fish hybrid Atlanteans. And this suspicion is confirmed when they find a horrible makeshift dwelling at the bottom of the trench. They keep going around, and in a cage marked livestock, they find a young trench dweller boy who doesn't appear that mutated compared to the other trench dwellers they've seen, but he kind of looks like the creature from the Black Lagoon, and he is literally marked as food. Kaldur breaks him out, holds his hand, and talks to him, and luckily the kid can speak Atlantean. And Kaldur tells him, I need you to swim and hide as far away from here as you can. I will come back for you. But for now, go hide. The boy agrees, and he swims off. But as they're there, Manta is studying the local sea life and finding weird things. Bizarre mutations. He's already theorizing based on the giant mosasaur, larger than anything that should ever exist. And while he's investigating, he finds a 3-clawed lobster. As they investigate the village further, they find a shrine. A shrine with a bloody spiral painted on the wall, and Arthur has to be snapped out from looking at it. Something is calling to him. The team continued down the trench so deep that light vanishes entirely. Luckily, Delphis has the power of bioluminescence. Her scales begin to glow. Kaldur lights his magical tattoos, and Manta lets out a couple fish-looking like drones that also glow. But the team are on maximum alert because this deep bioluminescence is a death sentence. Manta and Rhonda, Shark of the Aquamarines, take point. Manta has like a visor that lets him see in the pitch blackness, and Rhonda can use her ampullae of Lorenzini to actually steer her way through the water. As they continue, Arthur begins hearing Mira's voice calling to him. Arthur follows the voice of his wife into the abyss, with the rest of the team urging him not to, and suddenly, coming out of the abyss, is the horde of trench dwellers. I want to invoke pure thalassophobia in this scene. It is pitch blackness, and these things are darting out, taking out the team left and right. And suddenly the mosasaur swims out of the blackness and almost swallows them all, forcing the team to disperse, realizing they could all be swallowed as one if they stay too close together. Garth and Delphis are one of the duos formed during this split up, and they decide to hold on to each other's hands during this fight. Sparks start to fly. Manta grabs onto his son's back and basically points Kaldur like a gun and has Kaldur just sort of fire hydrokinetic blasts in areas, taking out trench dwellers, and they manage to dodge the mosasaur's attacks thanks to Shark of the Aquamarines. Arthur sees the mosasaur coming one time though, and he hurls the trident of Poseidon at it, embedding in its eye. It roars and swims away, with the trident still sticking out of its eye. And with that, the trench dwellers retreat too. The team head deeper into the trench, but as they go deeper, being in this blackness for so long, Corey Wilkes, Barracuda, has a panic attack, and he says whatever he's doing, whatever they're heading towards, he cannot be there for, and he runs away. They keep going down to the trench. They're tracing the signal from the sunken ship, trying to find out where it is. And they're finding that it gets stronger going down a tunnel at the bottom of the trench. They swim into it, and suddenly the darkness lights up a little bit. Bioluminescent sea life and plants are in these impossibly deep, dark tunnels. So they're not surrounded by pitch blackness anymore. But as they swim through these endlessly seeming tunnels, all of them begin having nightmarish hallucinations. Some of them imagine figures standing directly behind them. They're hearing whispers. Black Manta sees Lucia staring at him from around a tunnel corner. Kaldur sees his parents, and Arthur sees his wife crying over a crib with their dead future son in it. Arthur asks her, "What happened?" And she says, "You did." And when she turns around, he is staring face to face with what appears to be an eldritch horror, think like Mind Flayer from Dungeons & Dragons, version of himself. They all manage to snap each other out of it, but as they're going, they see Corey Wilkes' Barracuda again, and they think this has to be another hallucination. But they reach out and touch him, and he is real. But when he turns around, his eyes are glazed over, and he tells them all, he is real. He has returned. And he lunges at Shark, trying to eat her. The team leap in to stop the seemingly feral Barracuda, and eventually Octopus has to break his neck. But unfortunately, Rhonda was badly wounded in this, and she is bleeding, and her blood is mixing with the water. And suddenly the team hear the roar of the horde of trench dwellers from down deeper into the tunnel. And Rhonda knows what she has to do. She urges everyone to go on without her, and they hide in a corner as she swims as fast as she can in the opposite direction. Suddenly the horde swim past the team and follow the blood trail, and we see the camera blur, so we only see the silhouettes. The horde rip Rhonda apart and devour her. Lorena begins to panic but steals her resolve, looking at the remaining members of her Aquamarines, and they say that they will complete this mission to honor their fallen comrades. And as they begin going down deeper into the tunnels begin opening up wider and wider, eventually into a massive underwater chamber, a sunken kingdom of horrible, twisted rock that appears older than Atlantis itself. As they go, they find even more horribly mutated sea life, including a herd of giant seahorses, and one approaches Arthur, and Arthur becomes friends with it before the rest of the herd swim away, leaving one to just sort of tag along behind him. They head deeper into this chamber, and they find the entire Kingdom of Xebel locked in horrible, twisting, rock-like cages, but all of them are quiet. And worse, almost all of them have begun growing fish appendages. They are mutating from something. And this is when Kaldur'ahm realizes that child from up above, the food, that wasn't a trench dweller child. That was a child from Xebel who had been mutated into a fish person. As Kaldur is searching through the crowds of people, he finds his mother and father, but their eyes are sunken in and glassed over, and they are saying about how proud they are that they can be there to assist in the Old One's return. Kaldur then hides as the mosasaur swims overhead, chasing the herd of seahorses from before as it devours all of them. The Aquamarines and Garth continue to follow the signal from the ship, and they find the ship from the beginning of the movie crushed, clearly by something with giant tentacles. The team all meet back up, and they decide to camp out in the wreckage of the ship, mapping out everything they've found so far. Manta comments on the strange amount of mutation going on here. The Aquamarines also say that now that they've located the vessel, they have to find out what caused it to sink and stop whatever the fuck that is. And, of course, Arthur has to save all of these people. The team all head deeper into this cavern, and that's when they see him. Icthultu, the Old One, a 300-foot-tall eldritch abomination with a shock of white going across its face. The entire team watch as trench dwellers drag Xebelians before this creature. It raises its hand and it drains the Atlanteans of their life force. We then see the mosasaur swim up next to it, and we realize that the mosasaur is basically this thing's pet. It looks at the mosasaur, seeing that it's been wounded in the eye. Raising its hand, the trident flies out of the beast's eye, and the beast's eye heals over instantly. Icthultu then looks at the trident, and he recognizes it, and he lets out a bellowing scream that shakes the entire cavern. The team retreats, and they ask, "What was that?" And Arthur and Kaldur say in unison, "Oceanus, the great Titan." Long ago, Poseidon and the rest of the Greek gods had to fight a race of beings known as the Titans, and they stole their power. That's how they became so powerful. Poseidon was a metahuman with Atlantean-like abilities, but the godliness, the ocean mutating powers that he used to turn all of his followers into Atlanteans, the power to give his power to other people, that was stolen from Icthultu, who the Atlanteans referred to as Oceanus because he was the ocean itself. Based on the streak of white going across its face, they all theorize that the white light resurrected the beast, and it has been feasting on trench dwellers to regain its stolen Atlantean power. And based on how many people it's been draining, it's probably close to fully recharged. The team retreat back to the ship to talk things over. Kaldur and Manta are scared that they won't be able to save Kaldur's parents, and Arthur is scared that they're not going to be able to slay this beast. As the team are talking this out, they hear something swimming through the ship towards them. They all stop, pull out their weapons. They are on guard to attack, and swimming through the door is the giant seahorse from before. After its herd was eaten, it didn't know what to do, so it decided to follow Arthur's scent. So Arthur decides to basically adopt this thing, and he says, "I think I'm going to name you Storm." The team try to get some sleep, so they decide to split the night watch into shifts. The first shift is between Garth and Delphus, who share a little kiss before the next day. The next shift is between Arthur and Kaldur'ahm. They talk about this creature. Arthur says he can feel its psychic power pushing into his mind, and he says he can only imagine how bad it would be if he was trying to fight this thing alone. Kaldur'ahm agrees that that's good that it isn't affecting him that much, but then the camera pans down and we see that Arthur is just drawing the spiral over and over and over again in the dirt. Kaldur then asks Arthur, hey, you were trying to tell me something the other day at the beginning of the movie when they were playing. What was it? And Arthur snaps himself out of it and he goes, look, Barry is dead, Bruce is dead, Clark is powerless, and Diana has left the planet. I'm the only original member of the Justice League left, and I'm about to have my second kid. After this, if you would do me the honor, I want to pass the mantle of Aquaman to you. And Kaldur'ahm accepts very happily. The next morning, the team all wake up, but they find that Arthur has vanished. Kaldur goes over to where Arthur was sleeping and finds all of the spiral drawings, and the entire team are scared. As they're heading in, they see that the chambers, the cells holding the thousands and thousands of citizens of Xebel are empty. And when they get back to the grand chamber, they see Arthur, but it's not Arthur. It is that horrible mind flayer version of Arthur that Arthur saw in that tunnel. He is standing there. He is holding the trident of Poseidon, the weapon forged to steal Oceanus's power. And Arthur is using it to channel all of the power out of the Kingdom of Xebel and into Ixtultu. The team jump in trying to stop this, and we get the final fight. Narwhal shifts into his horrible monstrous form, and he slams into the Mosasaur as Garth and Kaldur attack Arthur. They're trying to snap their mentor out of it, but Ixtultu's voice comes out of Arthur saying, Poseidon's heir is gone. There is only Ixtultu. And hordes of trench dwellers attack the rest. Black Manta swoops in and decides to take on the Mosasaur by himself, unleashing the full capacity of his suit. The remaining Aquamarines are doing pretty good against the trench dwellers, but Ixtultu just raises one of his hands, and suddenly all of them begin writhing in pain as they are bombarded by his psychic energy. We then see Koryak begin to change. His already sort of hybrid form grows more monstrous. Claws growing, teeth sharpening, scales forming. Delphis begins to grow claws, her scales growing up and down her legs. Octopus of the Aquamarines loses his human appendages entirely and becomes a giant octopus. And as this is happening, Arthur is still fighting off Kaldur and Garth. They are bombarding him with hydrokinetic attacks, and he is trying to deflect it with the trident, which is slowing down the collection of Atlantean powers, angering Ixtultu. And he raises his other hand towards those two, and they are psychically attacked. Seeing his son in pain, Manta activates his eye beams, cutting the Mosasaur clean in half. But then we see that his suit gives him a low battery warning. That blast means he only has 15 more minutes of power down here, meaning he will drown and die here. And so Manta decides to do one last thing. We see him use a communicator on his wrist to hack into the computers of the ship at the surface, the one connected to his Suicide Squad implant in his neck. Manta screams to Kaldur that he loves him, and he jets towards Ixtultu. The Titan doesn't acknowledge the small, insignificant human swimming towards him, and just before Manta connects with his face, Manta detonates his own neck implant, letting out a massive explosion. This wounds Ixtultu so much that his psychic attacks are broken, and the team get to fight back. And on top of that, Ixtultu seems to have lost his link to Arthur. Arthur comes to and sees his body, seeing the monster that he has become. He talks to Kaldur and Garth, trying to figure out what they can do, and Arthur realizes he knows exactly what to do. He's going to perform the ritual that Poseidon did 2,000 years ago. Kaldur says that he can't because Poseidon died doing that ritual, and Arthur pushes Kaldur away, saying, "Tell Mira I love her. Goodbye, Aquaman." And Arthur turns around to Ixtultu, who has almost completely healed after Manta's sacrifice. Arthur rushes towards the Titan, trident in hand, and pierces it in the chest. And we see Arthur, holding onto it, begin to draw the power he had been siphoning into that beast back into the trident. Ixtultu begins to wither and shrink, and Arthur begins to glow. We see him de-mutate. His hair and his beard are back. His severed hand from Crisis grows back, and for a brief moment, Arthur is the god of the sea. And Arthur turns around, looking to the people of Xebel and all of the Aquamarines, and he raises his trident, channeling that power back into everyone there. As this is happening, Icthultu raises a withered hand and tries to swipe at the team, but the wound in its chest where Arthur had stabbed it begins to bleed, and we watch as the horde of trench dwellers that it once controlled devour the Titan in its entirety. And then we watch as all of the people of Xebel are reinstilled with their Atlantean power. They're no longer under Icthultu's control. They are healed and they are whole once again. And then Arthur collapses. We watch as everyone gathers around Arthur, who falls to the cavern floor, dead. The Xebelians look at their former High King in awe, and the team and the people of Xebel all leave the area. We see many of the Xebelians are still mutated. We watch as Aqua Girl, Lorena Marquez, marvel at her now truly Atlantean abilities, including her fish telepathy. Garth approaches Delphus Badami as she is looking at her scales, and Garth comments about how they are so beautiful. She blushes and begins to lightly glow, and she is now embarrassed that her powers give away her feelings. Octopus is so horribly mutated, he cannot return back to the surface, and so he is granted citizenship in the Kingdom of Atlantis. Koryak shifts back into his human form, finding that all of his mutations went into his hybrid form. So he thinks that's cool as shit. He has a big awesome monster form now. And as they are all exiting the trench, the little boy from before swims up to Kaldur'ahm. Calder's parents ask who this boy is, and the little boy finally introduces himself, and he says his name is Lagan. His parents were killed during this, and so Kaldur'ahm's parents adopt the young boy. And Kaldur, with the trident of Poseidon in hand, returns it to Queen Tula. Mira is devastated, and in her arms she is holding a newborn baby boy. Originally, she was going to name it Orin, after Arthur's fake Atlantean name when he first came to the kingdom. But instead, she decides to name him Arthur Jr. A giant funeral is held for Arthur. The Justice League are in full attendance, and all of the kingdoms of Atlantis are there to mourn their High King. And in his honor, the Kingdom of Xebel is renamed into the Kingdom Arthuran, mixing his two names, in honor of the great king that saved all of their lives. Mira, Andrina, and Arthur Jr. move back to Arthuran, where Mira becomes its local queen. And that is Aquaman Abyss in my DC cinematic universe.